Welcome everybody, this is Chandra Easton here, speaking to you about the Earth's Great Change. In this particular talk I'll be talking about China and North Korea. I'm an esoteric astrologer and a spiritual healer, and I'm using the charts of the summer solstice, which is the 22nd of June this year, 2015, and they're very similar charts, the one for Beijing and the one I cast the Chinese one for Beijing and the one for North and South Korea, but there are differences, slight differences, and I'll speak about those as I go through. The purpose of these talks is to elaborate changes that are happening on a consciousness level, on a political level, on a social level, economic level, and the body of the earth. Collectively, these changes are known as the Great Change that's happening on Earth. Yes, okay, so the way I will work with the charts is that I'll look at the chart for the summer solstice, and then I'll look at it through the lens of astrocartography, which takes the chart and wraps it around the planet and focuses in upon Beijing, and I can see which different parts of China that are indicated geographically and in other ways. Okay, so the first thing to mention about this chart is that it has Uranus on an Aries rising. Now Uranus has been in Aries for a little while now, a couple of years, so 3 years, something like that, and it has a very revolutionary energy. And it's a revolution. Revolutions have been happening all over the earth to bring about the change that's needed, and sometimes revolutions are successful and sometimes they're not. But the purpose of a revolution is to galvanise the hearts of the common people, to rise up for change and to liberate whatever it is that needs liberating in their particular country. So the planet of revolution, in the sign of the planet of change in the sign of revolution is sitting on the front door of China, right on the doorstep. So I would imagine that the best way to describe this is to say that the time for revolution in China is at hand, and it's a time for the passing of the old guard away and the new, more emancipated approach to life in the 21st century that's more inclusive of the millions of Chinese people. We have seen on our media small representations of gatherings and small sort of strivings towards democracy, and the attempt by the Chinese people to throw off the sort of the yoke of the paternalistic or the you see this chart has Pluto sitting conjunct the midheaven in Capricorn, and it's like a very, very tight fist that holds the country, a bit like a fairly authoritarian parent who's waging a losing battle to control their wayward teenager. It has that kind of an energy about it. China's outgrown something about the way it has been governed and run, and the people have a voice and the people have a say, and the people are speaking loudly and clearly, and the Uranus is given a great strength in this chart by being conjunct the Aries rising, and it activates the two planets through to Leo. So there's courageous, and I know that we occasionally here in Australia we see on the world media the artists speaking up, and art is a wonderful medium for bringing the world's attention to issues, and as I understand it, there is a rising middle class, there is a strong power consolidation that runs the country, and there are millions and millions of working class, ordinary Chinese people who struggle to better themselves in their lives. So I'm very excited to see the Uranus sitting there, because it indicates to me that the consciousness of the Chinese people is rising up. couple of other things I'll talk about. There are 2 planets in Pisces, Chiron and Neptune, and they sit in the 12th house. And well, the way I look at it, that this is part of the karmic shame of China's past, and it's particularly connected to Tibet. You know, the suffering of the Tibetan people, the loss of their homeland, the sort of invasion that happened, I don't know, is it 50 years ago? And continually there are still ethnic groups in the far north and the far west of China who are marginalised and labelled as terrorist and treated badly by the ruling elite, the communist government, and this is just a continuation of the repressed cruelty that happened to the Tibetan people, and because of the courage of the Dalai Lama and many of his people, the teachings of Buddhism and the teachings of the forgiveness of one's enemies or those who have done harm to you, they have been brought to the world stage. And so this is the positive side of the very tragic history of Tibet that continues. And I see that as the couple of planets in Pisces in the 12th house. Yes, this summer solstice chart for all around the planet has a Sun, Mars, Vulcan conjunction. Very fiery, very volatile, very warrior-like energy, and it's buried in this chart. It's buried it's buried in the 3rd house. And I guess what I would say is that the intellectuals within China, the educated Chinese, they want change. And they want more of a voice, and they want more of a say, and they want less rules, and they want access to the internet, and they want freedom of speech. And the freedom of speech, the fight in China is for the freedom of speech, and the fight in China, I think, is being waged by the intelligentsia, as we call them, the educated middle class Chinese, and also the artists, on behalf of all. So I see that as very liberating. There has been some talk recently of a slowdown of the Chinese economy, but there's also the Chinese government are very, very quick to implement new technologies and to try and stay ahead of the game. And so I think that they are adapting well for the changes of the 21st century. They're adapting well to try and deal with their pollution issues. They're adapting well to deal with education, to make the most of the middle class that's rising. They're adapting well in many specialised areas, I think. In terms of the economy and its downturn, I suppose what I can see is a fluctuation and a diversification. I don't necessarily see a collapse economically, but more what I see is a fluctuation and a diversification. So way that money has previously come in to the Chinese coffers may vary, but I think that they have a great capacity to read the new situations and to take advantage of them. But also I'd say that there's a level of propaganda and spin that attempts to keep the status quo in place. Now if I take this, and I've just been talking around the chart at the moment, but if I take the chart and I contemplate it as I'm about to do with another map here on a geophysical level, and I'm looking now on my computer at the map of China, and there are a few things that are very striking. One of the things that's very striking is that the line Uranus and the line Pluto, they meet in Taiwan, in the island of Taiwan. And so on a geophysical level, Uranus is associated with tectonic change and Pluto is associated with the ending of things and also volcanoes. So I was a little disconcerted to read that in the middle of 2014, oh no, I beg your pardon, just in April 2015 there was a 6.4 earthquake very, very close to Taiwan, just on the I don't know if that's the China Sea, I think it probably is, on the eastern edge of the island of Taiwan. There was a 6.4 earthquake, and there have been quite a lot of moderately large earthquakes around Indonesia and this area, and even into Japan. And so I wonder whether this is a warm-up earthquake for a greater quake that could happen very, very close offshore to Taiwan. Yes, and as I was doing some reading around this, what I read was that there are 335,000 people live on the island of Taiwan who would of course be in great danger if the quake activity accelerated. Okay, now that Uranus line, not only does it go straight through Taiwan, but it also goes straight through Shanghai and Nanjing and other regional towns, and then heads up into Russia. So, as I said, the Uranus line is either revolution and the push for greater personal freedom, freedom of speech, or it's earthquake activity, but it's a liberation from the past. So I'm inclined to think that it's really connected to the burgeoning middle class, the well-educated middle class, a lot of whom live in the coastal cities, and particularly in Shanghai, who are flexing their intellectual muscle, and also the artists, as I mentioned. Okay, now I'll talk a little bit about the Pluto line. The Pluto line comes from Russia, goes down through the Sea of China and into Taiwan, and in my research I discovered that there was a very large what's called a stratovolcano. I really don't know what a stratovolcano is, but it was described as a sleeping giant that had awoken, and the name of this very large volcano, and it awoke and began activation in the middle of 2014. Now, they call it the sleeping giant because the last time it erupted was 940 AD. So that's more than 1,000 years, almost 1,100 years ago, last time it erupted. The name of this sleeping giant volcano is called Mount Bagdu, or the Chinese name is Tanchi. Yes, now it is the second largest volcanic eruption on Earth. I say that again. When it erupted in 940 AD, the seismologists have determined that this is the second largest volcanic eruption that has occurred on Earth. I have no idea how they worked this out, but that's a fairly astounding figure. And volcanoes are connected to Pluto, and so I noticed that this Pluto line goes up, as I said, from Taiwan straight through Shanghai, through the China Sea, and up through regional northeast China and into Russia. Now, fortunately, this volcano, it's about 250 kilometres to the closest town, and it's situated, on my map it looks to be, I'm guessing, but I'm thinking it's about 3 or 4 hours away from the Pluto line. This volcano's on the North Korean border, sort of out by itself, not around any major close town, but still on the North Korean border. Yeah, so very sort of something to watch, really, whether this particular volcano continues its waking up process. Continuing to look at these lines, the Uranus and the Pluto line, I noticed that the Uranus line crosses the Yangtze River. And the Yangtze River looks, to me, it looks like a dragon. And the mouth of the Yangtze is at Nanjing, I think, yeah. And it goes inwards, and a few hours inland is where the Three Gorges Dam is, and this is where the three mighty rivers, the Yangtze, the Upper Mekong, and a river called Salween, were all dammed. I don't know how long ago it was, feels like it's at least a decade, maybe it's longer. But very controversially, these three mighty rivers were dammed to create the Three Gorges Dam. And it was, I suppose, one of the biggest things that precipitated a movement from a lot of rural people who were no longer able, their valleys and their homes and their villages were all flooded and had to go and to live into the cities. Now the Uranus line crosses the Yangtze. As I was doing some reading about the Three Gorges Dam and the Yangtze, I saw some photographs of the Yangtze before and after the dam, and it's very sad to see it. I mean, I suppose that's what dams do. They provide the lifeblood and the water to the cities, but at the cost to the rural infrastructure and the cost to nature. And to me, the way I looked at it, it looked as if nature had been decimated. And now I see a Uranus line crossing towards closer to the mouth. It's not that close to the Three Gorges Dam, which is a bit more inland, but I guess I speculate if there was any kind of tectonic activity, and it may well be that there isn't. It may well be that the Uranus line is simply about social and political revolution or unrest for people striving for greater freedom. But if it was tectonic, then surely there would be great disaster around the Three Gorges Dam. Okay, I think that's probably all that I might say about the Chinese chart, but I'm going to move now to the Taiwanese, sorry, not the Taiwanese, the Korean chart. Now, this chart that I have is for North and South Korea, because the capitals of North and South Korea, they're very close together, really. Now, Phnom Penh, is that how you pronounce it? Phnom Penh, I think that's right. The capital of North Korea. I cast the chart for the summer solstice there, and like the Chinese chart, it has Aries rising, but unlike the Chinese chart, the Uranus is not activating. The Uranus is not bringing any liberation. It's not bringing freedom. It's not bringing greater voice to the people. In fact, it's the opposite. What I see in the North Korean and the South Korean chart is that the Grand Cross, we refer to it as a nodal cardinal Grand Cross, it's angular. The South node sits on the Aries rising, and the North node sits on the Libra descendant, and the Sun is very close to the IC. What this means to me is that there's a trapped situation. The South Korean and the North Korean people are effectively trapped by the division of their country, by what's happened in their country. The stranglehold of the very powerful government in control in North Korea, who have effectively divided the country. The country's been divided into two, and I see the division very clearly. The three planets in Gemini in the third house, to me they talk about the suppression of identity and the suppression of knowledge and the fragmentation of families and the no access for brothers to see sisters and so on. And there's this sort of awful wrenched energy, and I think the issue of the separation of the country and the repression, it's very stark in this chart. And but I guess an analogy that I would use is that it looks like it looks almost like a prisoner who can't begin to find or even contemplate a way to break out. There's a level of hopelessness and helplessness and entrapment, and I can't see the revolution there. I can't see change. I wish I could see the change. I wish I could say that I could see the collapse of the North Korean, but I can't see it. What I see is the stronghold that's not yet broken, and the need for the South Korean and the North Korean people to find their voices and find their courage and step forward and step up and step out. But it's a long way coming. And I must say my knowledge of the history of this is very poor. But I have a question, and it's to do with the North Node sitting in Libra on the descendant. And my question is, does China or other Asian countries have a karmic obligation to support the South Korean people? Or for that matter, the North Korean people, to unite the country, or does America have a role and a responsibility? I'm not sure. I don't know enough about the history to make an educated comment on it, but it's fairly clear from the chart that there's a karmic knot, and that this karmic knot around the division of Korea that's gone on for, well, to my knowledge, a long time, decades, possibly longer, but I think at least since the 50s, this issue can't remain. It needs to be dealt with. It's a glaring injustice. That's it. There's a glaring injustice going on. The assets appear to be fairly tightly controlled by North Korea against its people, North and South. The harm directed to the people by this separation and this suppression and this repression is very strong. There's very little wriggle room in this chart, very little that I can look to and say, oh, well, I can see that there's hope or progress. I wish there was, but I can't see it. And I think that possibly they need advocates, they need a voice, they need, I don't know, is it the United Nations, is it other countries in Asia? Someone needs to go into bat for this country. But at this stage it looks to me as if the stranglehold's fairly strong. Now I'll take the South Korean chart and look at it on a physiological level, and North and South Korea sit between the Pluto line that's got a connection to that quite terrifying volcano, the one that hasn't erupted for 1100 years, that started grumbling, the sleeping giant. It sits between that's the Pluto line, and a Saturn line that goes sort of north of Japan. So they're kind of between the devil and the deep blue sea, really. I'm inclined to think that unless that volcano continues its activity, then really the issue is about human rights abuse, and it's about North Korea and the leader, Kim Jong-un, being challenged about some of the human rights abuses that are going on. I was reading a 2015 report of the United Nations that outlined the systematic abuse, murder and enslavement and torture and rape and forced abortion and political prisoners. And, I just get the sense of a silent scream coming out of North Korea and South Korea. There is a lot of suffering, but you can't hear the scream because they're locked away. It's been locked away, and what's most required is this sort of freedom of information. Yes, and so we wait for the Chinese people to find their voice. Failing that, it's almost, the sense that I have is that if all the world is a stage and we have some of the big players nearby, China and Japan and Russia, then North and South Korea, they're like pawns on the chessboard. They really, there's this sort of kind of trapped, stuck between the devil and the deep blue sea energy. It sits there. And yet somehow or other the United Nations have done this expose, this 2015 report into the systematic human rights abuses, and I don't know what the next step is from that, but fairly horrific information. Just one of the many, many corners of the world where the atrocities continue unchallenged. Now that's a sort of a sad note to end on, really. You may have realised that I'm making lots of little short talks. This one's covering China, North Korea and South Korea. I should say that the solstice, the summer solstice chart that starts on the 22nd of June, it's a potential chart, and some of the issues that I've spoken about may happen. Some of them may be in the very early stirrings and may come to full flower at a later period. So you could say from the middle of 2015 on, there's some of these issues that I'm talking about are up for contemplation, and everything really depends on the will of the people. And that's the sort of the missing ingredient in any attempt to predict changes for nations and for countries, is that the powerful heart-based decisions by the people can change everything. So we pray for that. I'm Chandra Easton. You can connect with me through starastrologyhealing.com. I work with people from all around the world doing your astrology, looking at your life, your planning, your year ahead, your relationships, the purpose of your life. I work with Skype, I work individually. I'm also a spiritual healer and a clairvoyant. I'd love to hear from you. Stay in touch. Bye for now.